Bloodstained shadows. The one-eyed butcher of Millstone Hollow in the remote, fog-shrouded town of Millstone Hollow, where the dense forest swallowed the last rays of sunlight, a chilling legend lurked, one that parents whispered to their children to keep them indoors after dark. At the heart of the town was Grimm's Meats, a butcher's shop run by a man who had become a local enigma, Elias Grimm. Years ago, an accident had claimed one of his eyes, leaving him with a single, piercing orb that seemed to glow with an unnatural intensity. His silence and grim expression were unnerving, but what truly terrified the townsfolk was the unshakable feeling that something deeply sinister lurked beneath his butcher's apron. Elias was no ordinary man. His cleaver was rumored to be sharper than any blade in the county, but more than that, the whispers said it was thirsty, not just for meat, but for something far darker. The shop itself, a dim, cramped space thick with the metallic scent of blood, became a place no one dared enter once the sun set. But what truly petrified the town were the mysterious disappearances that began soon after Elias lost his eye. Clara, a bright young woman beloved by many, vanished one rainy evening after a trip to the market. The whole town mourned, but soon, more people started to disappear. Mostly those who walked alone at night or who crossed paths with Elias in the market or near the forest's edge. Panic spread like wildfire. The police found no leads until Detective Mason Reed was called in, a hardened man with a reputation for solving the unsolvable. Reed's first visit to Grimm's Meats was underwhelming on the surface. Elias welcomed him with cold politeness, his remaining eye fixed with unsettling calmness. But when Reed explored the shop's basement, he found a secret door concealed beneath a loose floorboard. Behind it lay a nightmare, a hidden chamber transformed into a grotesque killing floor, stained with fresh blood and lined with hooks dripping crimson liquid. On the butcher's table, tools smeared with darkened stains hinted at horrors beyond mere animal slaughter. The detective found evidence that suggested Elias wasn't just a butcher. He was a serial killer with a monstrous obsession. Victims' remains were displayed like trophies, each one meticulously cut and arranged, as though Elias was performing a grisly ritual. Some of the scraps seemed to show human hair and skin, and the lingering scent of iron was suffocating. Interviews with townsfolk and a few rare survivors revealed the terrifying truth. Elias was not just stalking the night. He was hunting with predatory patience, his one eye glowing eerily in the dark, a beacon of death. Survivors spoke of being chased through the forest, the sound of his heavy footsteps closing in, the glint of his cleaver flashing under the moonlight. His strength was unnatural, and his cruelty beyond comprehension. A dark theory soon surfaced, that Elias's missing eye was not an accident but a consequence of a pact with some malevolent force. The eye, some said, granted him inhuman strength and a thirst for blood that no normal man could quench. Others believed he was cursed, doomed to stalk Millstone Hollow forever, collecting souls to sate his endless hunger. The town's fear escalated into outright terror. People stopped leaving their homes after dusk. The once lively marketplace turned into a ghost town by nightfall. Even the bravest hunters refused to venture into the woods. And yet, Elias remained elusive, his shadow slipping between the trees, leaving behind only silence and dread. Determined to end the nightmare, Detective Reed armed himself and descended once more into the butcher's lair. There, he uncovered a twisted shrine made from bone and sinew, a macabre altar dedicated to some unknown dark deity. Suddenly, Elias emerged from the shadows, his one eye blazing with madness and hunger. The two men clashed in a brutal battle of survival, steel ringing against steel, blood soaking the cold stone floor. Despite Reed's wounds, he managed to corner Elias and force him to flee into the forest, disappearing into the darkness like a phantom. The butcher's reign of terror ceased for a while, but Millstone Hollow would never truly be safe again. The butcher's shop remained locked and empty, a haunted relic of evil past. Locals swore on stormy nights they could see a single eye glinting from the forest shadows, watching and waiting for the next victim. Parents still tell their children about the one-eyed butcher, warning them, "Stay inside, stay safe, and pray that the shadows don't come for you next." The months that followed Elias Grimm's death were anything but peaceful for Millstone Hollow. Though the butcher's corpse lay cold and broken beneath the ancient oak, the darkness he had summoned seemed to have rooted itself deep within the town's soul. Detective Mason Reed left Millstone Hollow physically healed but mentally fractured, carrying with him scars that no surgeon's scalpel could erase. His dreams were plagued by haunting visions, gruesome images of dismembered bodies and that single, burning eye staring at him from the abyss. The town's uneasy calm was a fragile illusion, as if the very air held its breath, waiting for the nightmare to return. At first, strange events were dismissed as coincidence or superstition, but soon the townsfolk could no longer deny the creeping dread. Pets began to vanish without a trace. Dogs and cats disappeared from backyards, only for their mangled remains to be discovered days later, discarded like refuse on the forest's edge. The night brought sinister noises, guttural growls, scraping claws, and whispering shadows that seemed to slither just beyond the streetlights. People locked their doors tighter, eyes darting nervously toward the fog that rolled in thicker and darker each evening. Then, a tragedy struck that shattered Millstone Hollow's already fragile spirit. Tommy Parker, a bright-eyed 10-year-old boy with a contagious laugh, vanished from his bedroom one night. His frantic screams pierced the darkness, yet no one could reach him. Search parties scoured the woods, but all they found was his bloody jacket hanging eerily from a gnarled tree branch deep within the forest, its fabric torn and stained as if dragged through hell itself. The town's whispers turned into terrified hysteria. Some swore they had glimpsed a hulking figure with one glowing eye watching from the shadows. Others claimed to hear the sound of heavy cleaver strikes echoing through the night. The legacy of Elias Grimm was alive and more terrifying than ever. Desperation and guilt compelled Detective Reed to return, despite warnings from his closest allies. He had escaped Millstone Hollow to protect his sanity, but the town's cries for salvation tugged at his soul like a noose tightening around his neck. He arrived with a heavy heart and a mind sharpened by fear and resolve, armed not only with modern weapons but with ancient texts and protective charms handed down by a local historian who believed that Elias's evil was supernatural, more than mere human cruelty. Reed's investigation took him deeper into the black heart of the forest, into shadows where no man dared tread. He discovered a hidden cavern beneath the twisted roots of the ancient oak, where Elias had performed his darkest rituals. The walls were smeared with dried blood, and the floor was littered with bones arranged in symbols pulsing with unnatural energy. It was a temple of horror, an altar to a malevolent force that had consumed Elias and threatened to consume the town itself. The deeper Reed ventured, the more he felt the presence of something watching him. Something ancient, hungry, and merciless. The air grew colder. The forest fell into unnatural silence as if nature itself feared to breathe. And then, as if summoned by Reed's intrusion, Elias Grimm appeared from the shadows, no longer a mere man, but a monstrous entity infused with dark power. His single eye burned with an otherworldly fire, his cleaver glistening with fresh, dripping blood. The butcher's face was a twisted mask of rage and pain, a reflection of the evil that had corrupted his soul beyond redemption. The battle that erupted was unlike any Reed had ever faced. It was a brutal clash of flesh and spirit, steel and sorcery. Every blow from the cleaver was a challenge to Reed's resolve. Every slash threatened to rend his sanity. But Reed had prepared. He wielded silver weapons blessed by ancient rites and invoked incantations passed down through generations. He fought not only for his life but for the fate of Millstone Hollow, battling a darkness older than the town itself. As dawn crept over the horizon, Reed found the strength to utter the final incantation, a desperate plea for salvation. The cavern trembled, the unholy symbols flared with blinding light, and Elias Grimm let out a scream that seemed to shake the very fabric of reality. The supernatural fire in his eye dimmed, the cleaver fell from his grasp, and the butcher crumpled to the ground, his monstrous form fading into the lifeless shell of a man. Though the curse was broken and the butcher dead, Millstone Hollow would never be the same. The scars Elias Grimm left behind were etched not only into the town's soil but into the hearts and minds of its people. Parents whispered warnings to their children. telling stories of the one-eyed butcher who had haunted the woods and devoured the innocent. The forest remained a place of fear and superstition, where shadows danced just out of sight and the wind carried a mournful cry. Detective Mason Reed left the town once again, but this time with a wary hope that the nightmare was finally over. Yet deep inside, he knew that some darkness is too ancient, too vile to ever be fully vanquished. The story of Elias Grimm became a legend, one that would echo through generations, a chilling reminder that evil wears many faces, and sometimes, it looks like the butcher waiting just beyond the trees, his eye forever watching, waiting for his next victim. Years slipped by like the slow drift of mist over the hills of Millstone Hollow, a town forever scarred yet stubbornly clinging to normalcy. Life marched onward. Children grew, schools filled with laughter, and the old legends faded into bedtime stories whispered by frightened parents. But beneath the surface, the wounds left by Elias Grimm's reign of terror never fully healed. His name, once spoken in dread, had begun to blur, turning into a myth of a shadowy figure lurking in the woods. The townsfolk tried to convince themselves that the nightmare had ended, that Detective Reed's desperate confrontation had sealed the butcher's fate. But Reed himself had vanished, retreating from the world after the gruesome events. No one saw him again after the final night when the forest seemed to swallow him whole. Some said he'd been consumed by madness. Others whispered that he'd taken up a lonely vigil against darkness that still prowled unseen. His name, once a beacon of hope, became another forgotten fragment of the past. Yet, every year as autumn rolled in, an unsettling chill returned with the lengthening shadows. The forest, once a place of quiet refuge, now felt like a living entity watching, waiting. Hunters and hikers spoke of strange sounds, of footsteps following in the underbrush, of eerie, distant cries that chilled the blood. A deep unease settled over the town, as if the ground beneath Millstone Hollow itself still pulsed with malevolence. One night, long after the harvest moon had waned, the fog crept back with unnatural thickness, swallowing the edges of the town and seeping into every crevice. Windows rattled in their frames, and doors creaked open without a breeze. Those brave enough to peer outside caught a glimpse of a faint, unsettling glow beneath the ancient oak. Blackened and twisted still, a silent sentinel to horrors past. There, in the suffocating darkness, a single eye blinked open, cold, unyielding, and utterly inhuman. It was the eye of the one-eyed butcher. The legend was no longer just a story told to scare children. The curse had never truly lifted. It had merely retreated into the shadows, gathering strength from the blood spilled in the past, hungering still for flesh and fear. The town awoke the next morning to news of a disappearance. A young girl vanished near the forest's edge, her footprints ending abruptly among the fallen leaves. Panic spread like wildfire, but the authorities, scarred and cautious, hesitated to dig too deeply. The past had taught them one brutal lesson. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. In the days that followed, a pattern emerged. More vanished, more bodies discovered, each bearing the unmistakable signature of Elias Grimm's grotesque handiwork. The butcher had returned, his monstrous appetite renewed. Panic gripped Millstone Hollow as the people realized the nightmare was far from over. A new generation of detectives, desperate to solve the mystery and save their town, pored over old files and cold case reports. They uncovered Reed's journal, cryptic entries filled with fevered warnings and desperate strategies. It spoke of a curse tied not just to Elias Grimm, but to the very soil of the forest, a malevolent force that transcended the man, living on through darkness and death. The town's residents began to question everything. Who was Elias Grimm? Really? Was he a monster or merely a pawn in something far darker? What price had been paid to awaken this evil? And could anyone stop it before the butcher claimed them all? The answer was uncertain. But one thing was clear: evil's hunger was eternal. It fed on fear, on silence, on the fragile hope of forgotten towns. And as the shadows lengthened and the night deepened, the butcher's cleaver gleamed once more in the fog, ready to carve a path of terror that no soul in Millstone Hollow could escape. The curse had awakened. the nightmare was reborn, and the butcher still thirsted for blood.